For most of my career, I explained myself constantly to studios, to critics, to journalists, to people whose opinion of my choices should not have mattered and did. Every film, every decision, every position I held on anything that anyone found inconvenient, I produced an explanation. I constructed them carefully. I made them reasonable and thorough. I thought being understood was what I was after. Not once did the explanation produce what I was actually hoping for. What was I hoping for? I was hoping for something that felt like vindication. The specific relief of having someone who doubted the decision understand it clearly enough that the doubt disappeared. Being understood well enough to feel justified, not simply tolerated, actually approved of. That was what I was building the explanations toward every time. And it is a thing that an explanation almost never produces, because the people whose approval matters enough to explain to are almost never changed by the explanation. I want to talk about why men explain themselves. Not the surface reason, the social one, the polite one. The real reason, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And once you stop doing it, something changes in how you move through the world that you cannot fully put back. Stay with me. The first thing. This is the one most men never name, because naming it is uncomfortable. You do not explain yourself to inform people. You explain yourself because you are not fully decided. Somewhere underneath the explanation is a fear. The fear that the other person's disapproval will make the decision wrong retroactively. That if they do not understand it, or do not agree with it, or reject it loudly enough, the ground under the decision will shift. The explanation is an attempt to stabilize the decision by getting the room's approval before you have to live with it. Think about a choice you made recently that you felt the need to explain. Not to someone directly involved in the consequences, to someone peripheral. A friend, a parent, a colleague. Why did they need the explanation? What would have changed if you had simply said what you decided and stopped there? Nothing would have changed, except the weight in your chest. You explained because the weight needed somewhere to go. The explanation was not for them, it was for you. It was a way of distributing the discomfort of having decided something that not everyone would endorse. Here's the thing I learned, the expensive way. A fully decided man has nothing to explain. When did you last make a decision and not explain it to anyone? How did that feel compared to the times you explained? Not because he does not care what people think, but because his certainty about the decision does not depend on the room's agreement. The explanation is the tell. It announces that the decision is still up for review, that the right counterargument might still shift it. Think about two men. The first makes a decision and then explains it to his partner, to his colleagues, to whoever is nearby. He gives the reasons. He frames it carefully. He watches for the response and adjusts the framing based on what he sees. He is still deciding inside the explanation, finding out whether he is allowed to have chosen what he chose. The explanation is the deciding, the actual internal work of committing to the choice, done out loud in front of people who have no business being inside that process. The second man makes a decision, says what it is, stops talking. If questioned, says, "I have thought about it and this is where I landed," then stops talking again. He is not being rude. He is simply not uncertain. The decision is not available for renegotiation through the quality of his explanation. Here is the specific thing the first man gives away that he does not realize he is giving away. He gives away the information that the decision is still movable, that the right pressure applied through the right argument might still shift it. The explanation does not just describe the decision. It reveals the decision's relationship to his certainty, and the people around him read that relationship instantly below the level of conscious thought. They know whether the decision is a starting point for a negotiation or a finished thing. The explanation almost always makes it a starting point. Who do you trust more? Which one makes you feel like something is actually going to happen? The second thing, this is the structural problem nobody sees. When you explain yourself, You hand the other person a jurisdiction they did not earn. Every explanation is an implicit invitation. It says, here is the reasoning, evaluate it. Tell me whether it holds. And the moment you issue that invitation, you place the other person in the position of judge. You have given them the authority to weigh your decision and return a verdict. The problem is not that people judge badly, though they often do. The problem is that you gave them the bench. Nobody asked for it. Nobody earned it. Most of the people you explain yourself to do not have the full context, do not have the relevant experience, and do not have any stake in the outcome. You handed them power over you that they did not have before the explanation started. I encountered this most clearly on The Passion of the Christ. Every studio passed. Some of them were not simply declining, they were explaining to me at length why the decision I had already made was wrong. The meetings were sophisticated attempts to place me in the position of a man who needed to justify his project to people whose approval I would require to proceed. I could see what was happening. They were offering me the bench. They were waiting for me to climb into it and defend the project. The moment you step into that dynamic, the moment you start defending, you have conceded the jurisdiction. You are no longer a filmmaker who has decided to make a film. You are a supplicant who needs their approval to know whether the decision is valid. I watched what happened in those rooms when men did defend their projects. Not mine, other filmmakers, other decisions, other meetings where the studio's skepticism was the dominant force in the room. The ones who defended and explained and produced reasons produced something else alongside the reasons, a picture of themselves as men whose decisions were provisional, whose work was still in formation, whose final product would be the result of the negotiation rather than the result of the vision. The studios felt this. The projects that came out of those rooms bore the marks of it. I stopped explaining it. I put up my own money. The jurisdiction I gave to the project was not the studio's, it was mine. And the specific quality of what came out of that refusal to negotiate, the specific thing that reached people, was the quality of a decision that had not been explained to death, that had not been compromised in the process of gaining approval. The film was what I believed it should be, unmodified by anyone else's jurisdiction over it. Who you hand the bench to determines who is in control of the decision. Hand it to no one. Think about the last explanation you gave. Whose bench were you climbing into? The third thing, this one is physical, and once you feel it, you will recognize it from memory. Explaining yourself leaks the energy the decision required. Every hard decision carries pressure. The kind of pressure that, if held, drives action. The first morning, after a real decision, feels a specific way. There is something charged in it, something that wants to move. That pressure is the fuel. It is exactly what you need to actually execute on what you decided. The explanation relieves the pressure. Not completely, not in a way that feels like resolution, in a way that feels like deflation. You explain the decision to someone, they respond, you discuss it, and an hour later you feel something specific, a kind of flatness where the charged feeling was. The decision is still there, but the energy behind it has dispersed into the conversation. Most men do not notice this because the relief of the social interaction covers it. You explained, they engaged. The discomfort of being misunderstood was briefly relieved. What you do not notice is that the fuel you needed to execute the decision is now partly in the room rather than entirely in you. The men who changed things kept the pressure inside, not because they were antisocial, because they understood, consciously or not, that the pressure was a resource. Every explanation is a withdrawal from the account you need to fund the action. I have watched this pattern destroy projects, not through bad decisions, through exhausted momentum. A man makes a real decision. It costs him something internally. There is a specific weight that accompanies a decision that actually matters. He explains it to his closest people. They engage. He explains more. They have concerns. He addresses the concerns. A week later, he has produced a thorough, reasonable, well-considered explanation of the decision and has done almost nothing to execute it. The explanation was the thing he did instead of the thing. There is a specific state that follows a real decision, a charged, uncomfortable readiness that wants to become action. The explanation converts that state into conversation. The conversation is not the action. When the conversation ends, the charged feeling is gone. What remains is the decision and the memory of the conversation, not the energy to execute it. The discipline is holding the charged state past the social pressure to relieve it, past the moment when someone notices you have decided something and asks what it is and why. That moment, the moment someone turns toward the decision with curiosity or skepticism, is precisely when the explanation feels most justified and most necessary. It is the moment when withholding it feels the most like arrogance or secrecy. It is not arrogance, it is preservation. Where does your energy go after you explain something important? Run this back when the urge to explain is loudest. That is exactly when the pressure matters most. That is the moment to keep it in. Listen again tomorrow the second time through. You will catch the specific place where this applies to you. The fourth thing, this is the one that should end the habit on its own, but does not, because the discomfort of being misunderstood is harder to tolerate than logic suggests it should be. Nobody who needs the explanation will understand it. Nobody who would understand it needs it. Read that again slowly. It is not a paradox. It is just true. The person who disagrees with your decision and whose disapproval you are trying to preempt with the explanation, they will not receive the explanation as information. They will receive it as an argument to be countered. Every reason you give them is not a building block toward understanding. It is an opening. It is a place to push. They will find the weakest point in your reasoning, not because they are malicious, but because they have already decided you are wrong. And the explanation is an invitation to prove it. The person who already understands why you made the decision does not need you to explain it. They are nodding before you finish the sentence. The explanation is not giving them anything new. There was a man I knew years ago. I am going to call him David because that is not his name. David was one of the most thorough explainers I have ever encountered. Every decision he made, every professional choice, every personal boundary he tried to hold arrived wrapped in an explanation. The reasoning was usually sound. The explanations were often impressive. And it cost him everything, slowly, because the people who needed the explanation could always find the hole in it. They could always produce a counter-argument that the next explanation had to address. David spent years in a negotiation. He did not realize he had opted into a negotiation with people who had no stake in the outcome except to keep the negotiation going. He mistook their engagement with his explanations for relationship. It was not. It was leverage. The day David stopped explaining, stopped cold, stopped entirely, those relationships ended. Every single one. And he understood then that the relationships had been built on the explanation, not on him. The moment he stopped being negotiable, the people who had depended on his negotiability disappeared. What remained was quieter and smaller and more actual. The people who stayed were the ones who had not required the explanation in the first place, the ones who already understood or who trusted his judgment without needing it justified. Those relationships did not have the texture of the negotiating relationships. They had a different texture entirely, easier, less charged. The specific ease of being around people who do not need you to explain yourself. David told me later that the silence of those first weeks, the silence after he stopped explaining and before anything new had come to replace, what had gone was the most uncomfortable period of his adult life. And also, he said, the first time in years that he felt like himself. Because the explaining had been so constant and had required such a sustained performance of reasonableness, that he had stopped knowing what he actually thought about things. He had been producing explanations for so long that his own positions had become negotiating positions. Tools for managing other people's reactions rather than things he actually believed. Stopping the explanation gave him his positions back. Here is the exercise. Write down the name of one person you keep explaining yourself to. Someone whose opinion of your choices you keep trying to change. Then write what you actually want them to say. Not what you want them to understand, what you want them to say back to you. The specific sentence. Write that down. Now ask yourself, is that sentence in their repertoire? Are they capable of saying it, given who they are and what they need? If the honest answer is no, if you already know they will not produce the thing you are actually after, then you are not explaining to them. You are explaining to yourself through them. You are using them as a sounding board for your own uncertainty. And that is a use they cannot consent to and should not have to serve. That is the real thing. That is what you are actually after. And once you see it written on the paper, you will see whether this is a conversation worth having or a need you have to address differently. Most of the time when men do this exercise, they realize they already knew both things, what they wanted the other person to say and that the other person was never going to say it. They were explaining to them anyway, for years. The exercise is just the moment they stop being able to pretend they did not know. Come back to this on the day the urge to explain feels most justified. That is the day to hold it. The fifth thing, this is where I am going to say something direct. You are not explaining to inform them. You are explaining to make their disapproval stop. Those are different projects, and only one of them is honest. Disapproval produces a specific physical discomfort. Most people will do almost anything to relieve it. The explanation is the most socially acceptable version of that relief seeking. It looks like communication. It looks like transparency. It looks like the behavior of a man who respects the people around him enough to share his reasoning. But underneath it, in the actual experience of the man producing the explanation, it is the attempt to make a feeling stop. The feeling will not stop through explanation. The person whose disapproval you are managing has their disapproval for their own reasons. And those reasons are not primarily about the information you are withholding. They are about who they are, what they need, and what your decision does to their picture of the situation. More information does not address any of those things. It extends the conversation in which the disapproval is present, which extends your exposure to the feeling you are trying to relieve. You already know the specific person this is about, the one whose disapproval you keep trying to explain away. How many times have you explained yourself to them? Has it ever changed anything? You have explained yourself to them many times. You know the explanation does not resolve anything. You know that after the explanation, the position is usually the same, and you feel worse for having tried. Stop explaining to that person. Not because they do not deserve an explanation, because the explanation is not for them, it is for you, and it is not working. The sixth thing, this is the one I lived through publicly enough that I can tell it plainly. Explaining is a performance, and the performance costs you the thing it is supposed to protect. John Ford ran his sets with a specific authority that had nothing to do with volume. He was not the loudest man in the room. He was frequently the quietest. But when he made a decision about a shot, about a performance, about anything, the decision was not available for discussion. Not because he was dismissive, because there was nothing in his manner that suggested the decision was still in motion. It had been made, it existed. The conversation about whether it was the right decision was simply not one he was prepared to have. I worked with directors who explained every decision. Thoughtful, generous men who wanted their cast and crew to understand the reasoning. The set felt democratic, it felt collaborative, and things took twice as long and felt half as certain. Not because democracy is bad, because the explanation of each decision kept reopening the decision. The crew did not experience a director with a vision. They experienced a man checking his vision against the room's response. Ford's sets felt different. You knew where you were. The decisions had already been made. Your job was to inhabit them, not to evaluate them. And the specific quality of what was produced under that kind of authority, the decisiveness of it, the weight of it, was inseparable from the refusal to explain. Early in my career, I developed a version of reasonableness that I would perform in certain rooms. Interviews, studio meetings, the specific situations where I needed to be understood as a man who had thought things through, who was fair, who could see other perspectives. The performance was not dishonest. I did think things through. But the performance was a layer between what I actually thought and what came out of my mouth. A managed version. Reasonable flavored. I got skilled at it. That is the specific danger of the performance it responds to practice. The more you do it, the smoother it gets. And the smoother it gets, the easier it is to mistake it for genuine communication. I thought I was being transparent. I was being strategic. The distinction is that transparency starts from what is actually true and communicates it. Strategy starts from what the room needs to hear and constructs it. I was constructing. The specific cost of the performance was authority, not the visible authority, the position, the credits, the room that would listen, the internal authority, the sense of being a man whose position is what it is regardless of how the room receives it. Every time I managed the explanation, every time I shaped it for the audience, I confirmed to myself that my actual position was not enough, that I needed the shape, that the unmanaged version was too risky to put in the room. That is what the performance costs. Not credibility. Credibility it often produces. What it costs is your sense of your own sufficiency. Every time you perform reasonableness, you register the real version was not enough. I had to add something. And that registration compounds quietly over time into a man who does not trust his own unmanaged positions, who always needs the layer, who has forgotten what the unmanaged version even sounds like. John Ford never explained a directorial decision, not once in my observation. He made decisions and he lived with them. When they were questioned, he acknowledged the question and moved on. He was not dismissive, he had listened, he simply did not produce a justification. And the authority he carried because of it was something no amount of thorough explanation could manufacture. The room knew this man has already decided the decision is not available for discussion. There is nothing to argue with. A man who is genuinely reasonable does not need to perform reasonableness. The performance announces that what is underneath it might not be sufficient. When I stopped explaining the passion, stopped defending it, stopped shaping it for the rooms that were skeptical, something shifted. The project became more itself, not more polished, more actual. The version that reached people was the version I believed in rather than the version I had negotiated into existence through a series of careful explanations. The refusal to explain was itself a creative act. The seventh thing, the last one, the one that ties the rest together. Here is what you are actually trying to win when you explain yourself and why you never win it. Most explanations are attempts to win an argument that is not about what you think it is about. You think it is about the decision. It is not about the decision. It is about the relationship between your decision and the other person's sense of how things should go. Their position is not primarily about the information. It is about what your choice does to their story. More information from you does not revise their story. It just gives them more material to work with. This is why explanations so rarely resolve anything. Not because you are explaining poorly. Because the explanation is aimed at the wrong target. The disagreement is not informational. No amount of information addresses it. Marcus Aurelius faced this at the highest possible level. An emperor surrounded by people with reasons to want him to justify every decision. He wrote every night not to persuade anyone, not to prepare his explanations, but to clarify his own position to himself. His practice was not the management of other people's opinions. It was the management of his own clarity. He knew that a man who is clear about his position does not need to defend it. Defense implies doubt. He had his own court, and he was the only judge in it. Here is the practice. The next time you feel the impulse to explain, before you open your mouth, ask one question. Am I doing this to inform, or am I doing this because their disapproval is uncomfortable? If the answer is the second one, close your mouth. Hold the decision in you. Let them have the uncertainty. Let them have the disapproval. You do not need their agreement for the decision to be sound. Marcus Aurelius did not explain himself to the Senate, to the army, to the people who had grievances with his decisions. He wrote about the decisions privately at night to himself, and he applied to them the only judgment that mattered, his own. He asked himself whether he had acted in line with what he actually believed, not whether he had performed the action convincingly, whether the action itself was right. And then he lived with the answer, without explanation, in public. The practice he was doing every night was the opposite of explaining. It was the internal court, the place where he was genuinely accountable, as opposed to the external court where he was performing accountability. The internal court is the one that matters. A man who maintains it does not need the external one. He has already judged himself more rigorously than any room will. Say what you decided. If pressed, say you have thought about it and you are confident in it. Then stop. That second silence, the one after you say you are confident and before you fill it with the explanation, that is where the authority lives. Most men cannot hold it. They fill it immediately, reflexively, because the discomfort of the silence feels like the discomfort of the disapproval. It is not the same thing. The disapproval is about them. The silence is just air. Sit in it. The man who can hold that silence does not need the other person's agreement. He already has his own. And his own is the only agreement that was ever going to make the decision sound. Play this back when the pressure to explain is strongest. That is the moment this applies most. Most men who hear this will nod and then explain their next decision anyway. The habit is old, and the discomfort that drives it is real. The pull toward explanation is the pull toward relief. And relief is harder to resist than anything that requires enduring discomfort for a longer-term gain. But here is what is on the other side of stopping. Not silence exactly, presence. The specific quality of a man who is not managing the room's relationship to his decisions, who is simply in the room with his decision, without the machinery of justification running. That quality is immediately felt by the people around him, not as arrogance, as settledness, as the specific texture of a man who knows what he thinks and has already decided whether the room agrees. I noticed this in my own life the first time I held an explanation back in a situation where I would previously have delivered it automatically. The person who expected the explanation waited for it. The silence was uncomfortable, and then something shifted in them, not in me. The absence of the explanation communicated something the explanation never could have communicated, that the decision did not require their endorsement, and their relationship to the decision changed. Not because I had convinced them, because I had made clear, without saying so, that their conviction was not required. That shift from the needing of agreement to the not needing of it is not a technique, it is a state. You cannot perform it. It only comes from actually resolving the internal question, which is whose judgment of this decision actually matters. The answer for most of the decisions most men agonize over explaining is only yours. But some of you have already recognized the specific dynamic I have been describing. The person you keep explaining to, the feeling after the explanation, the fact that nothing ever resolves. For those of you, you already know. The explanation is not working. It has never worked. Stop waiting for the version of it that finally does. Make the decision. Say what it is. Hold the silence. That is the whole practice. Everything else is the explanation.